Morning everybody, welcome to the meeting of the Corporate Governance and Audit Committee. Thanks for being here. Just before we start, just to let you know, we had a request to webcast these meetings, so as we're in the room that has the functionality, we are webcasting today, so it's online. So just bear that in mind and make sure you do use the microphones when you're speaking, otherwise I guess it won't pick it up. So just remember that one. Okay, so let's start with the agenda and membership of the committee. We have had a couple of apologies. Do you want to say, Lee?
Yes, thanks, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor Hussain and Councillor Melanie Stephen, also from Naheed Mather, and in terms of Naheed Mather, we've got Councillor Sokal as a substitute for this meeting. Thank you.
So we haven't had any apologies from Councillor Pinnock, so she probably is on her way, we'd assume, but we'll see. So, minutes of the previous meeting. Any comments on these? Are we happy to move these as a correct record? Yep. Oh, Chris, yep.
Sorry, I'm happy to have them as a correct record. I just wondered how we picked up on any actions, particularly on item 12, which mentioned the chair and the head of internal audit and risk looking at arrangements to bring a report to a future meeting about the external audit report. So I wondered if anything had happened on that.
Can you put your microphone on?
The chair and I were meant to be having a conversation which we haven't quite had yet. I think we're aware that the LGA has been doing a bit of work as well, so I think it's about understanding where those fit together to how we produce something in due course. So yeah, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks for that. We'll make sure that's picked up. We've got an update for the next meeting. Okay, happy with the minutes? Let's move on. Declarations of interest. Anybody need to declare anything? No. Okay. Admission of the public. Like I said, public meeting. We are being webcast today. There is one private item at the end, so obviously we'll deal with that when we come to it. Number 5, deputations or petitions. No. And 6, public question time. Anything on that? Okay. So we'll go straight to item 7, which is the half-yearly monitoring report on Treasury management. James. Or is it Rachel?
So Rachel's joining us.
Hi, Rachel. Sorry, I didn't realise you were
Hi. Thanks, Chair. Good morning, everyone. I hope you can all hear me. So this is the 6-monthly report on the Treasury activity from April to September. The Council operated within the strategy approved by Council in March earlier this year, investing cash prudently by keeping cash in short-term, low-risk investments in order to manage day-to-day cash flows. And this report gives assurance that the Treasury management function is being managed prudently and proactively. This report includes the requirements of the updated Appendix 4, which is mandatory from 1st of April 23. So I'll just go over the main points. Investments averaged 34.5 million, ranging from a peak of 76.1 in April to a low of 25.8 in August. The majority was placed in instant access secure deposits, such as money market funds and the Debt Management Office, which is part of HM Treasury. And the Council's average investment rate for the period was 4.43%. Returns on liquid cash investments, 4.57%, and the 10 million invested in the CCLA property fund returned a net dividend yield of 3.97%. So a bit on the economy. So the official bank rate increased by 1% from 4.25% in April to 5.25% in August. UK inflation remained high during the period, however, it did start to fall in the latter part, reducing to 6.3% in September. And the largest downward contribution came from food prices. Falling inflation gave some indication that higher rates were working. However, economic growth remained weak with the continuing use of monetary tightening policy. The Bank of England MPC, which is the Monetary Policy Committee, kept bank rate the same at 5.25% in September and at the recent November's meeting. Financial markets remained volatile and gilt yields high throughout the period. The 20-year gilts peaked at 4.97% in August and fell back to 4.84% in September. So borrowing, up to September, the council's external borrowing increased by 36.4 million to 650.2 million. The council repaid 9.7 million of long-term loans, with a further 10.6 to repay by the end of the financial year. And there has been a substantial rise in the cost of both short and long-term borrowing over the last 18 months. The bank rate was 2% higher than at the end of September 22. So as gilt yields remained elevated, consequently, the Public Works Loan Board, the PWLB borrowing rates rose, which affects the rates at which the council can borrow. And the council has an increase in CFR due to the capital programme, and as a result, an increase in borrowing requirement. And we use cash flow forecasts to make borrowing decisions. During the period, 40 million of long-term EIP loans were taken from the PWLB, ranging from 5% to 5.08%, which is shown in Appendix 5. And the mid-year forecasted liability benchmark, which is shown in Appendix 4, which is based on updated capital plans and use of reserves, highlights the need for approximately 106 million of additional borrowing for the full year. The current borrowing plan is to take a combination of medium-term maturity loans between 3 to 5 years and long-term EIP loans around 15 to 20 years, depending on the yield curve. This will fix in interest rates, which will provide some longer-term certainty over interest costs and stability to the debt portfolio. The medium-term loans can then be refinanced at a time when rates hopefully will have reduced. And Alan Close now expect the bank rate has peaked at 5.25% and then will remain there until Q3 of 2024, when cuts then will be steady into the following few years. In terms of future treasury management, the council does hold quite a lot of LOBOs, 61.5 million. So LOBO loans are where the lender has the option to propose an increase in the interest rate set dates, following which the council has the option to either accept the new rate or repay the loan at no additional cost. So as market interest rates have risen, there was an increased probability of call options on the LOBOs being exercised by lenders. No LOBO loans were called during the 6 months to September. However, there are appendices at the back which show counterparties, debt maturity, repayments of loans, new loans, plus the new treasury management indicators. We've also added a glossary to the back of the report, which I know was requested at a previous CGAC. So if anybody's got any questions or comments?
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. Members? Anything to say? No, Rachel. Councillor Taylor, you want to say?
All I was going to say is just to thank Rachel for the report, and I think, you know, we're content largely.
Yeah,
Great.
I agree. Thank you very much, Rachel, and it was helpful definitely to
Thank you.
have the appendix. That definitely,
Mm.
the glossary, that definitely helped. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, no problem. So we now move on to item 8, which is the audit finding report 2023. We've got Aaron here, so I'll hand over to you, Aaron.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, everyone. So this is our audit findings report, which describes the work, our findings from our work on the accounts for the 22-23 financial year. Pleased to say that the audit is almost very nearly fully complete and signed off. There were a couple of outstanding items this week that seem to have currently being resolved. We'll just have some final internal quality review processes over the next week or so. I'm hoping to the audit can be signed off in the next couple of weeks, as soon as possible, really, which is as planned. So it really has gone very well overall. I'll just highlight some of the key points from the report. So on page, I'm just going first to our own internal pages. Apologies, or I can try and on pages 8 to 10 of our reports, which just describes the work done on these what we call the significant risk areas, where there's the highest chance of misstatements. We haven't noted any real significant issues. So there's no issues in regard to management override of controls, inappropriate use of journal entries, that kind of thing. No issues we noted there. Secondly, property valuations. Again, so an area we focus on a lot, but we again did not notice any material issues there. And thirdly, the pensions issue, which is probably the most difficult one we spend the most time on because the figures are so big and so much goes into it. Again, there was just the unique matter of the pension fund being in surplus this year, which gave the council an asset on its balance sheet. So we did have one finding just regarding how that is presented on the balance sheet, but that's been resolved. And we have just in the last few days received information from the auditor of the pension fund, which should allow us to conclude that work in the next coming days. So that's quite pleasing. We're in a much better position on that than we've been in the last couple of years. So that's good news. Just going through the report. So we obviously do our value for money work on the side. The value for money work is also complete in terms of our initial work. On page 25 of our report, there's a summary. We have drafted our annual auditor's report. However, it's going to be made available for the next meeting of CJAC because we weren't able to give management enough time to properly prepare their responses in time for it to get on this agenda. However, our conclusions, the headline conclusions, are shown on page 25 of our report, and they're similar areas to the last report, which came in July. The first one is continuation of the recommendation around the overall financial sustainability in the medium term, and so we have a lot more detailed commentary in our report, which will be available in January. The headline for that is that while we know a lot of work is going on, there's still a lot of risk about the achievement of saving plans that we need to highlight. And secondly is a separate point, a specific point about the dedicated schools grant, which has been in deficit for a few years now, and we're highlighting to the committee that it is known that there is a deficit recovery plan with the Department for Education. However, it was off track at the year end, 31st of March 23. And because of that, we've taken the approach nationally. Kirklees is not the only council in this situation. We've taken the approach to classify that as a significant weakness in arrangements because it is behind the plan. Although we do comment in our report that the council is doing what it can and engaging positively with the department to try and get that back on track, but it does remain an area of high risk and needs a lot of close monitoring. So that's the headlines. So there is a slight typo on that page where it does say refer to our report, the annual auditor's report, AAR, which but that report is not available until, will not be available till January. So apologies for that impression. So continuing, some other highlights on page 27. It has a list of some additional services we've taken on this year, following which is to do with the grant certification, where in the last few years it's been done by Mazars as a separate engagement. However, they were not able to complete that this year, and finance asked if we could do it. So we've taken that on. We've gone, and the page 27 describes the considerations we've made in confirming that we're happy that we can take that on with regard to ethical considerations and independence. These are all quite standard certifications that are usually done by the council's auditor. However, we do have to make a number of considerations and consider if there are any threats to our independence as it relates to the audit. So the committee is specifically requested to consider those. Moving on to the appendices. From page 31, there's our recommendations. There's only a couple of minor ones relating to the accounts. One with regard to related party disclosures, and the other one to have regard to the moving publication dates. And then there's a few pages of IT recommendations relating to SAP. None of these are highly significant, but there's always points we find that can be improved on, in the SAP being quite a complex system. And moving on to page 41, just shows those adjustments have been made to the balance sheet, which is to do with where the pension is shown, and also where the bank overdraft is shown. So the bank overdraft was previously included in cash equivalents on the balance sheet, but our view that we've taken in the last couple of years is that the bank overdraft, although it's used strictly for strategic cash management purposes, it's not that the council has had cash problem. It's a treasury management method, specifically at year end. However, from the technical accounting perspective, we've asked for it to be shown as an overdraft as liability. So that's been moved. And page 44 has two non-adjusted misstatements, which the committee is requested to, or is required to, approve management's treatment. And one is a follow-on from the prior year relating to the impairment of the loan to the stadium company, which has been most of the loan has now been impaired in the accounts, but I think due to ongoing uncertainty, the full loan has not been impaired by management. But our view from the accounting perspective is that the full loan would be impaired. So that's what that 1 million figure is. And the second unadjusted misstatement was we identified a capital accrual that was missed at the year end relating to an ongoing scheme, and we determined that it was an isolated instance, and because of that it was agreed not to, management decided not to amend the accounts for that. So the committee is requested to note that. And finally, the draft letter, representation and audit reports are found at the back, pages 49 and 52 respectively, and those documents will be finalised over the next week or two with management, and will then, as well as this audit findings report, before it gets published, it will be marked as final when it's agreed. And point.
Thanks, Aaron. Okay, members, any comments or questions? Chris, yeah.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. Thanks, Aaron. It's really good the way you summarise that long, complex document in a way that I can almost understand. So I've got a couple of questions. I think on page 14 of your report, you talk about MRP.
Yeah.
And say that the council's figure is below what you would consider good practice, but you concluded in simple terms that's okay. I just wonder what kind of processes you go through to reach that conclusion.
Yeah, it is an area of, definitely an area of focus, which is why it does get a page. There is an element of benchmarking. I mean, the council's not by far, it's not the worst. It's not, we don't see what is called an aggressive policy, which we do see in other places where it is clearly, you know, with not very prudent at all. So recognise we're saying it could be, it's on the it's not on the most prudent scale. However, considering there is the capital scheme multi-year going on, and it is supporting that, and there's no speculative, it's not funding any speculative, you know, investment properties out of town, retail outlets, that kind of thing. So we don't see any aggressive or non-prudent activity behind it. So that's why we're overall comfortable with it being slightly below the, you know, what's the general benchmark.
Thanks. And I've got a second question, if I may. Recognising that we've got, you know, the annual auditor's report is coming later on, if I could tease out of you a word to, in your conclusion around financial sustainability, you say the management has made progress. I was just trying to tease out an early view on whether you're going to put before made progress something like good or insufficient or slow, or how would you describe the progress the council's made, if you can give us a kind of work in progress for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's not, yeah, I've been involved in discussions, however, it's not my, I'm not I haven't written that report, however, and from my, we have had a lot of detailed discussions with, you know, James, Isabel and others. We have some savings identifications that have been going on. Our conclusion is we are saying there is a significant weakness in arrangements just because it's the scale of it, and it's not fully under control, and there is still a lot of risk in, you know, avoiding depletion of reserves and setting a balanced budget, avoiding you know, the section 114 notice. There's still a lot of risk, and we comment on how it could, you know, how we think it could be tightened, the process could be tightened further. You know, different recommendations around that, but it's we're not saying that the council is that finance, that, you know, don't know what they're doing or haven't got a hold on it at all. It's just, you know, we recognise it's extremely challenging. Doing what you can, here's how you could do it, even maybe try and do it even better, but, you know, but the risk is still there, as it is in a lot of places. So if that helps. Sorry.
James, are you wanting to add to that, to that point?
Thank you, Chair. I suppose that the thing to draw out in this is that the report, the timings of all these reports make it really difficult, and that the last report you got was 14 months in the making or something. So the discussions we were having that supported that were this time last year, and equally this time when we've redone the report, which is in draft. So I think what we're waiting for is, obviously the report's factual and is external audit's opinion at that point in time, and then what we'll do is provide some management responses to things, saying what is happening in the background. And it's where we kind of fell down a little bit last time. There just wasn't probably the picture of what was happening wasn't probably portrayed in the report. And as it delays and delays and delays, you kind of miss the timeline of it. It's almost got to be done, and it's accurate at the point it's written. And so what members will see when we come to, when the report eventually gets to committee next time, will be the external audit opinion. They'll be factually, okay, these are the things, this is what's happening to reserves, this is the MTFS gap, or so what will be in the budget gap, because papers will be shortly on the back of it. But they'll be showing the gap, and they'll be showing how the gap's going to be proposed to be made up and filled, whether that be savings or whether it's reserves. It can be those things. We obviously have issues that the settlement will provide information on funding levels potentially, but we, both from the back of yesterday, we're not expecting a lot more funding coming in. But I suppose all the pieces that make up the picture will be presented, and they'll just be, it's probably very difficult for external audit to turn around. And I'm not sure it's the job of that report to say it was something and 2 months later it's something different. It's almost, here's the position. Nationally, we look at levels of reserves, look at DSG, overspends and how that's treated. And Aaron's right, it's probably, if you look at it, but for that one in, I guess, as a bespoke item, there's two things there. There's a safety valve agreement that we've made reference to and has kind of gone through Cabinet, and how we progress against that, which we'll make reference in our sort of financial quarterly reports. And again, I guess the statutory override, because as soon as the statutory override would be pulled, that effectively draws out into, if you're coming to fund that, you would have to fund out reserves, which would again affect the reserves position. And we have actually updated the AGS to tidy up that wording, which is my item later in the agenda. I don't know if that helps with some of the clarity of sort of the difficulties in the timings and where that addresses the query.
Thanks for that, James. I'll bring some more people in, and then if there's any further points on that. Councillor Pinnock, you were next.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Sorry, I was a couple of minutes late. You know, we've got to make a judgment on what we see here, not on what James says. No, it might be clearer in next few months. Actually, I've got a lot worse in the next few months after the autumn statement, where local government, it's, from the figures I've seen, look as if they're going to be 14% worse off than they are now over the next 3 years. So we ought to at some point reflect on that, I guess. So what we've got in here is significant weakness, an MRP plan that is perhaps below where you would want it to be. We have progress being made on balancing the books, but actually this committee has no idea what that progress means. Nothing is ever shared with councillors, so you know, why would we know? You know, we're only elected. So I would add to that an incredible lack of transparency on the whole issues facing the council. And whether or not we can get out of this financial instability, I'm beginning to doubt, to be honest, without incredible slash and burn sort of decisions being made. However, so, you know, I read what you're saying in this report and say to myself that the council remains in a very, very difficult financial place. And I have no evidence at all that it is in a position to get out of it within the time scale that it needs. I think there's a reference in here to the use of reserves again at next year's budget to balance the books, and that, you know, there's only the bit of string called reserves is going to run out, and obviously continuing use of reserves piles on pressure. But you know, you only use it once, so you know, I would hope that we could get to a position where reserves aren't used to help pay for revenue spend, because to do otherwise just doubles the pain next year, the following year. So, you know, I read what you're saying, and this is not a reflection on what you've written, of course, but I'm just interpreting what I'm reading, And I would say, given what I know, because nothing is ever shared with councillors, so given what I know here, the council remains in a very, very difficult position. And the autumn statement is going to make it worse. So at some point, we're going to have to see what the figures actually say. But at the moment, we don't. So having said that, and the one issue that I did want to ask about was the DSG deficit. And I may be misinterpreting this, but am I right to interpret this as being some schools are overspending on their DSG? Is that what's happening?
Yeah, please.
But it's probably a bit more nuanced than that. I'm far from an expert on this side. What happened is we used to fund some of the high needs budget through the general fund to top up schools. And that was, we weren't allowed to do that anymore. They said, no, you can't do that, you need to put it in your balance sheet. And it's just sat in this bizarre area. I mean, it came to Audit Committee 3 or 4 years ago, because I think Audit, I have a feeling you might not have wanted to sign off the accounts for a little while, because you're very uneasy that the treatment was against, you had a different definition to you. So GT had a different definition to SIPFA, and there was kind of a bit of a standoff for a while. But it's these balances that were traditionally had been paid through the general fund that we were no longer allowed to pay through the general fund, and it's sat on the balance sheet, and it's sat as an unusable reserve, which effectively is a liability that's sat without a home, if you like.
So it doesn't lie with individual schools then?
It's the amount that the general fund would have paid to schools. So it can't. So when we get the DSG balance as a whole, some of that will be directly allocated out to schools, and there'll be a bit that you get for admin, and then there's a high needs block.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's the high needs block, and then comparing the sort of the requirements of that high needs block compared to the grant that comes in.
Oh, I see. So we were okay.
So
we were overcompensating schools from what? Because the high needs block contracted.
The high needs block wasn't
sufficient to yeah.
Because of numbers.
Yeah.
Presumably riding numbers in EHC.
Right, I understand now.
Care plans, and I'd say it was one that the general fund bankrolled crudely, or paid into as well to support it, so that there was enough money in the school system, and then statutorily we weren't allowed to. So
that makes there's a knock-on effect then to SEND in schools.
Yes, that's kind of what it is.
So schools, if we are able to use general fund to help schools who have a higher than predicted or higher than normal average, whatever, however the government measures it, they are going to be short of funds to help children.
Well, what we're saying is that expenditure is still happening. It just can't go through the general fund, so it's sat in this increasing reserve. So the schools get the. I think there's a. I don't know how well I'll be able to explain this. I think there's a categorisation across children, and there will be a financial amount that will be given to schools based on a categorisation, and the numbers are the numbers because it comes with the healthcare plan.
Yeah.
And so the funding goes to the schools based on the numbers.
Yeah.
And I think, hopefully it explains right, the ideal is that they stay in a school setting wherever possible, for lots of reasons. And so this is supporting those pupils with the care plans, with the appropriate funding for the school to be able to care for them, whether it be teaching assistants or...
So the DSG and the high what's it called, the fund for,
So the DSU monies probably don't allocate as much as our underlying
yeah,
needs.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
And
right,
we can't,
okay.
because of the way DSG is structured,
Yeah,
there's not a great deal
doesn't
of give or take.
provide, yeah, right.
And I think
So we-
historically that we're supposed to move to a fair funding formula. When I arrived at the council, like 10 years ago or something,
yes, it's been a
Um,
problem for years.
and that, the fact that it never moved to that
Yeah.
impacted us. And I think we always kind of said we'd have had 7 million more funding had we moved to this, but it's just been parked. And so the upshot is really, we're almost sat in this little impasse. We've got this negative reserve, which could, it's only, the only reason that, in a technical accounting sense, it's sat away from all the other expenditure that we have, and it's just kind of parked really with a statutory override saying this is how we have to deal with it.
Right,
But that statutory override, I think it might be 2025 when that runs out, and what GT are reasonably flagging is that is an unresolved problem. If that statutory override isn't extended,
where does that leave us? Yeah,
is that immediately a call on reserves, which is probably our basic take on it, but it feels like it's too big a national issue to actually end like that. But
right.
Sorry to go back. My understanding was that there is an arrangement in place with the Department of Education to resolve this, and that's what this talks about, is there's a plan where the council is being given more money by the Department of Education to help address it, on the basis that the council does some changes to try and improve the situation going forward. I think what this is referencing is that plan, so that the changes that the council is proposing to make is slightly off track, which is understandable given what's happened in the last couple of years. So the risk is that there was an agreement with the Department of Education to resolve this deficit by giving us more money, but it was predicated on the fact that we made changes to try and address the underlying issue. Those changes are behind plan. So there's a risk that the Department of Education could at some point come along and go, well, sorry, all bets are off. Now, that's unlikely to happen. My understanding is we're in active engagement with the Department of Education around this issue, and they're understanding where we are. But it absolutely is a risk, and that's probably why it's being disclosed where it is and in the way that it is. So there's a plan in place to try and address it, but we're not making progress we were deemed to, and it's understandable why. And those discussions are ongoing with the Department of Education at the moment, is my understanding. Hope that helps.
Councillor, I'm being told that's what you're saying is accurate. Paul, did you want to come in on that? Is that what you wanted to say?
I think that was a very good summary of the
Yeah.
ESB issue. There's some other issues I want to come in, but I'd like Councillor
Okay.
to finish this because
James, are you happy with that? I mean, what
yes.
I'm just thinking on this is that we've got the audit report coming next time. I think it might be helpful just to have some information on that bit, just to give us that context and confirm that what the discussion that we've had is accurate and things are just that little bit of detail, because I appreciate you're trying to have to give us the detail of that, which is a little bit unfair probably. So that would be good if we could do that. Did you want to say anything else before we moved on?
No, it was just confirming that, and I'm feeling there'll be a cabinet paper highlighting how we're doing on it, and because I think it's an ongoing, they're ongoing discussions. But you're right, you've got the nuts and bolts of what's going on in there. But I'd say it's two issues: safety valve and the statutory override, separate but linked.
Okay, thanks. So I'll bring Councillor Davis back in, and then if you've got some more points, Councillor Hill, bring back you. So, Paul. Paul, can you put your microphone on, please?
Apologies. I forgot we were being webcast. It is in one sense related to that because, as explained, that agreement is in place to help mitigate that. But we have the plan that Councillor Taylor referred to doesn't require, if you like, further investment from us as well. So monies have gone into that plan from the schools, from the budgets anyway. So Schools Forum have had to, as part of the plan, divert, and I don't know how many millions are, but been a fair amount. So there is that need for us to continue to find money from the school budget to help with this, as well as the government funding. So those are the two elements. There's an element of transformation as well, but that's extremely difficult because essentially demand is increasing all the time, and that's given us the problem. So what you pointed to is there's absolutely a risk. I think there's a risk in terms of financial risk, and I would like to think this doesn't happen because, as I said, I think this is a national issue. If, as Councillor Taylor says, the government agencies decide to stop this arrangement, then clearly that's a call on our reserves. The other risk, which is a really important risk, is to our children. And I think that's the thing that really concerns us, is we're already struggling to provide that, so it does exist there. So I absolutely think the auditor's right to highlight it in that respect. I think some of the other issues, just to comment, I take your point on this committee in terms of seeing numbers and budgets in terms of this issue of transparency, but I do have to comment, and this isn't criticising any group whatsoever, but you are aware that both your group and the Conservative group decided not to take part in the cross-party budget a group that we've set up. The new chief exec was very clear that he wanted to take that forward, and take that forward in a different form to where it was previously, with the aim of trying to share more detail. Understand entirely, that decision sits within your group, but I think it's difficult on the one hand to say there's a lack of transparency and then to pull away from that group. In terms of the overall risk and the discussion on reserves, again, I would agree, we absolutely don't want to call on reserves. The recent work that we're doing is trying to build the reserves up to make those sustainable. I'm sure our auditor is aware of that as well. And in particular, the monies that came from the West Yorkshire Fund have been put straight into reserves to create that resilience, to help create that resilience. And that's not always easy to explain to, if you like, people outside of the council who say, well, if you've got that money, why aren't you spending it on this service and this service? Well, we have to get our reserves to that sustainable and resilience that we need. But I think the auditors are absolutely right to point out there is a risk. None of us would be foolish enough to say there's not a risk. There's a significant deficit next for 24-25. I believe there are robust plans in place, but each of those plans, each of those elements contain a risk. And that risk can't be diminished in the sense of put to one side. We have to deliver on those, and it is, it is very difficult. I think you're right, Councillor Pinnock, to point out the difficulties that not just us as a local authority, but the whole sector face. And certainly, unless there is something that comes out in our settlement which surprises us, it looks pretty gloomy and grim for the next few years for local authorities in terms of government funding. So I think we'll continue to hear from auditors going forward that there will continue to be risk around us achieving balanced budgets, as will be the same for a whole range of other councils. But certainly at this point, from my perspective and Cabinet's perspective, and it's been commented on, there has, we believe, been significant progress in us putting together robust plans to achieve that 24-25 balanced budget. That will become apparent, obviously, as we go through the budgeting process in the new year. And certainly, I think if either group, both Conservatives and the Lib Dems, want to rethink taking part in the cross-party approach in terms of the budget, I know that we'd be more than happy to do that and reopen that opportunity. So I think that those are the main comments from me. And I said, I think that the sort of detail will be coming apparent, but I'm absolutely sure that we'll continue to hear from auditors that there will be risk, and there's risk right across the whole sector. So I think that's a fairly true statement. I don't think that risk, in my view, at all refers to a lack of management ability within the council, or a lack of robustness in some of the plans, but within any plan for a significant deficit, there's always going to be risk. So,
Thank you. Councillor Taylor, did you want to come back in on some?
To be fair, my last intervention was just helping explain explain something, so it wasn't my comments or views. I'd first like to respond to Councillor Davis really about the budget, cross-party budget group. We reluctantly withdrew from that. We didn't do it quickly. We didn't do it, sort of without a lot of due consideration. We did have conversations with the administration and with the chief executive. The problem was that we weren't actually getting any information through that group that told us anything. So he talked about sharing information. At that group, we didn't get details of any savings plans. We didn't know what there were. The first we knew about any plans or changes was when they were announced in the press. So if you're going to talk about having a cross-party group, there has to be a sharing of information. And there was no sharing of any financial information whatsoever. All we would get would be a presentation that showed a RAG status on various savings schemes. We didn't know what those savings schemes were. We didn't even know which part of the council they were sat within. All we were told was there were 11 planned saving proposals. Of these, 9 were green, 2 were, no, that doesn't add up. One was amber, 1 was red, or whatever it may be. But no further detail. So, I'm sorry, Paul, we were happy to work collaboratively. We were happy to share our ideas, but we weren't getting anything or anywhere. And I sat on that group. I was a member of that group. So I'm talking with, some knowledge of what was happening. And I was disappointed when we withdrew. But we withdrew because there was nothing. It was not beneficial for us or for officers, really, because we weren't discussing anything. There were several occasions when I asked for agenda items to be brought forward, and they were never brought forward. So, I'm sorry, Paul, you say that, there was an opportunity to collaborate. There wasn't. And no information was being shared, and that's the honest truth. But coming back
John,
to
can I just on that point, just to finish off, understand, and it was comments made, so fair enough for people to have to say on that. I think what I would say is that we've discussed that point. It's not directly related to the audit report. What I'll say is that, in response as well to what Councillor Pinnock said, if there's things that we feel that this committee needs to see in order to understand some of this information, if members communicate what it is that we'd like to see and that information isn't published in cabinet reports or whatever, then we can go through the process of requesting to see that information. And if we can't see that information, then the reasons why, so that I think then members have that. I appreciate the point about the other things, but I guess this isn't really the place to discuss whether there should be other groups, why people work in groups and so on. But
if I may
carry on.
finish, this isn't the forum that sort of information would or ought to be shared. Part of the reason for that is when we're talking about savings, it means changes to services which may impact on staff. Now, that has to be managed very, very sensitively. That has to be managed in an appropriate way, so there's the right communication in advance, sharing with staff and with unions. So it would be inappropriate to have in a forum like this. The cross-budget group was set up under a protocol when that information was not shared, even with other councillors. It was just the members of that group that we're going to be able to see some more information, but that information just wasn't forthcoming. It shouldn't be coming to this meeting. I'm sorry,
I agree with it. That's the point I'm trying to make. That's sort of the point I'm trying to make, which is that I'm not necessarily unsympathetic to the point you're making. I'm just saying it's not really something that we can resolve in this meeting. But that's fine.
To be fair, Chair, I would never have mentioned the budget group, except it was mentioned by Councillor Davis, and I felt obliged to respond.
Okay, that's fine.
That was not my intention to raise that issue. I wanted to talk about the report.
Yeah, move on to your other points, that's fine.
So, just coming back to the report, I share some of the concerns that Councillor Pinnock raised. My concern is it doesn't feel to me, again, as someone who's a bit of an outsider to what's going on, that we do have detailed plans in place and that they are thought through and sustainable. The perfect example was the recent announcements about parking charges that seem to be bounced through with very little detail, very little analysis, and has ended up being called in by scrutiny because there wasn't any clarity about what the decision-making process was to get to the decision to bring forward this plan. So it doesn't feel to me, as an outsider, that the plans are clear, detailed, sustainable, and maybe they are making progress, but I don't think that's being demonstrated by the way in which information becomes into the public domain and the detail that sits behind it. So I fully support this, and I do worry not just about closing the budget gap for this year or for next year, but where it leaves the council over the next number of years, because it's about the long term, not the short term. And it feels to me at the moment there's some knee-jerk reactions to short term, and this parking proposal that just suddenly popped out, there's any evidence of it anywhere. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor, you come back and then I'll let you respond to both points.
The issue I want to raise is if an audit report says that the council has significant weakness and there is progress, but we don't know what that means towards resolving that, as an audit committee, I think we ought to have some information, not necessarily all the detail, but some information about what the plans are and how and what progress is being made. Because otherwise, as an audit committee, we're back here in 6 months or a year's time. The significant weakness has got substantially worse, and we have failed in our responsibility, I think, if we haven't at this point said, well, okay, we recognise the national pressures on local government. Here's the significant weakness that the auditors have pointed to. We asked what progress was being made, and that's our job, not to decide whether the progress being made is appropriate or, you know, what the priorities are, but that progress is being made, and we don't know, actually. That's the point I want to make.
Okay, I'll bring you in, Paul, and then perhaps, I don't know whether you can answer that or somebody, one of the officers can answer, just in terms of those savings. What is the process for those through Cabinet or through this committee? If you can answer that, Paul. Paul, you've not got your microphone on, but...
Sorry, my apologies again. We did share the savings plan, track progress, so they were shared with the cross-party team. What wasn't shared, you're right, because it wasn't felt it was appropriate, was going down to the lower level operational issues, but there was an openness around that. So that's a bit, you know, not
disagree
accurate.
completely.
In terms of that, factually, we shared that information at that
Okay,
level.
I think we're going to have to...
So
I think we've both had our...
Chair,
agreed to disagree.
I was a
on that
member of
one.
that group and we weren't shared any detailed information
Yeah,
at all.
it's not relevant to this discussion. I understand it's been raised, but I think, Paul, if you can cover the other
I
points.
cover the Lib Dems would like to join the cross-party group. The aim
Chair,
was to look at
Chair,
this going further forward.
I think you need to close this down. We've had the debate. We've
Yes,
had
excuse me,
shared
Chair.
with us the
Chair,
chairs. We've had
excuse
shared
me,
with us the
Chair.
terms of reference for the group. Those terms of reference
Okay.
make it clear we aren't going to
I
get the
think
information
we need to
need.
focus on what the report is actually about. So if there's going to be no further comments on the cross-party working group, I think you've said enough, Paul.
I will, but excuse me, Chair, please. You know, I've not interrupted anyone, and I think it's unfortunate that Councillor Taylor feels the need to interrupt me when I'm actually giving a
Yeah, but I think
So
I'm listening to what's been said. I think everybody's had their fair say on
They
that.
have.
I think anybody watching will understand what the views of the different parties are. So I think let's move on to the points that were specifically made. If
Exactly.
you've got a response to that, go
In
ahead.
ter-
If not, we'll move
in
on.
terms of the planning, in terms of the risk going forward, again, I'd absolutely agree. There are going to be weaknesses, and the weaknesses that we have within the sector are because of a whole range of issues, predominantly because of 13 years, and I think you've referred to this in previous meetings, Councillor Pinnock, 13 years of underfunding of local authorities on the public sector, significant inflationary issues, which we're all aware of, and demand issues also increasing. So you're absolutely right to point out that there are weaknesses with regards to that in terms of the funding of authorities. In terms of the overall plans, I've referred to those earlier on. I believe we do have robust plans in place, but I am not pretending that it's going to be easy to hit that 47 million gap. But those plans are there, they're well thought out, they are being shared within Cabinet and also obviously across the executive team. And those are being worked on a weekly, a monthly basis. We work through that, and I think I talked about the process previously, whereby the Cabinet are actively involved in reviewing those plans through our executive board with the executive team. And clearly, that will continue. In terms of moving forward and the long-term approach, I think that's entirely right. The Councillor Taylor points that out. Knee-jerk reactions don't work. That's why we didn't knee-jerk react with some of the issues that were evident some time ago. What we spent time was trying to plan a measured, a more strategic view, which would take us through not just the last financial year or this financial year, but next year and onwards 25-26. That is extremely difficult when you haven't got a forward-looking view from government in terms of funding settlements going forward. That is a fundamental weakness which is affecting the sector. It's something the LGA have pointed out for a number of years, and until there are multi-year settlements which we have certainty around funding, there continue to be problems in that sense. But absolutely, we are not looking in any shape or form at knee-jerk reactions. In terms of some of the plans that have been put forward, there are going to be changes, and you've already seen changes in terms of increasing income for the council, because we have no other option but to do that to help us balance the books. There will be clearly impacts in terms of assets. Clearly there'll be impacts as well, and we'll minimise this as much as possible around some services. But what we're trying to do is protect those services which certainly impact our most needy and vulnerable, but we're also aware of the impact across the borough for all residents. So I think we've been very open about that. We're not pretending anything otherwise. But most definitely, we have to think medium to long term as well as short term. That is why we didn't, for example, spend reserves unnecessarily a few years ago when we were called upon to do that. Instead, we worked hard to keep those for the purpose that they needed, which is where we are now. And also, just to point out, the use of reserves is something that we don't like doing, but that is certainly the direction that government has given the local authorities, and has given the local authorities for the last period, that reserves should be used to help meet inflationary pressures. So this is not something that Kirklees has itself invented. It is certainly direction coming from a national perspective as well. So I think that hopefully gives a bit of direction on that one, Chair.
Yeah,
okay.
That's fine. Thanks very much. And I think we've had quite a good discussion on this one, and I think I'm conscious as well that we'll have the report next time where we'll be looking more at the recommendations on this, so I think there'll be further time for discussion. So I think for this report, we're just sort of noting the report, so thank you for that. Thanks for Aaron and for coming and presenting. and we'll move on to the next item. So that's item 9, approval of the council's financial accounts 22-23. James, hand over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So this follows on the back of the earlier Grant Thornton report. So the audit is now substantially complete. So this is the formal paper that follows that. So just a few key points in there. Just to note, the 6-week period where the public are permitted to inspect the accounts. So that's the public inspection period, as we call it. That started on the 5th of July and finished on the 16th of August. Just to clarify, there were no queries or objections raised, thankfully. I think we've appended the statement of accounts, which is the version that GT have audited. And once we get to the point where we've probably finalised, we'll publish that. Again, the VFM, just to note that it has to be completed and issued within 3 months after the audit opinion, so we'll be within those time frames. So we're expecting it's really the next couple of weeks to get the account signed. The AGS, the annual governance statement, was approved by committee on the 29th of September with delegated authority to the Chief Exec in consultation with the leader to make any necessary minor amendments to the statement. So just to note that the updated statement is included at the back of the statement of accounts from pages 136 to 151. And finally, there is a draft letter of representation which is signed by the Section 151 officer and chair on the back of the authority in this report. So again, that will be finalised at the point we're ready to sign off the audit. So there'll be, effectively, we'll apply some electronic signatures to the audit report and the letter of rep, and then we publish those as final documents. So in essence, it's a good news story, really. We are, I think, significantly ahead of regional colleagues and probably national ones as well. Very few have got to this point at this stage in the calendar. I think there's a willingness on both sides to shove it over the line whichever way we can. But no, it's a testament to Rachel and her team that we're here. And yeah, in a good position now. It's been painful for a few years, but the last couple have seen some progress. And so, yeah, it's a nice thing to report. So I guess what the report asks for is just a delegated authority, given the timings, for Chair, yourself, and Section 151 to sign the documents once Audit have finished these last couple of pieces of work and the documents are settled. Any questions?
Right. Thank you. Any questions, or are people happy with the recommendation? Councillor Pinnock?
This is a positive comment. So nationally, I mean, it says 12% somewhere of local authorities have got audited accounts signed off. My understanding, I think I got the information from the LGA, is that only 20% of local authorities have regularly got their accounts audited and signed off within a year, let alone, or sometimes, some of them are several years in arrears of getting them signed off. So, given that information, you know, I think that the council and the officers concerned and all our auditors have done a very, very good job in getting to the point at which, compared with, you know, Chelsea or whatever, who's laggardly with their audited accounts.
Chris, you want to come in?
Yeah, so just to add my own kind of congratulations both to the finance team and the auditors for getting us to this place. That's really good. I had thought at the last meeting when we approved the annual governance statement, we'd asked for some reflection on item 4, which is about housing and whether the action was really an action or just a commentary on the scale of the challenge. I don't think that's changed. And I did just wonder, but I think, having heard what James said, it's a timing issue as to whether the action in this statement that relates to DSG is now sufficient given the status of the DSG challenge has changed, because we now got it in a public report as a high-risk area. Surprised, I think, Martin, we did agree that item 4 would change, and I don't think it has.
Is this an old version? This is an older version, is it? Okay, thanks for that, Chris. So I'll make sure that that's done before anything's signed. Did you want to come back, James?
Sorry, yeah, you're right to reflect on the DSG side, but the text was reviewed recently, so it is, as far as finance colleagues are concerned, as up to date as it could be. We did that as part of, we updated some reference to the MTFS as well, and just clarified some of the wording actually around DSG and the statutory override, so they were actively reviewed. Probably the final thing to know is that in amongst all the other comments, there's a lot of assurance that collectively can be taken from the fact that the accounts are done right, and it's passed in an audit quickly, and so it might be a painful story, but the really important thing is that they're accurate and there's not the suggestion. So information's timely and it's done properly, and we're not chasing our tails, which would make it even worse, because if it was a tough story along with a bit of a query around the quality of the statements, that'd be a far worse position. So there is that positive to reflect on as well in that. Thank you.
Councillor Taylor, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just to echo Kath's points, I saw something from the Taxpayers Alliance that we're trying to beat councils up for the delay in getting accounts signed off, so they won't be giving us a hard time. But yeah, you know, so it is, you know, a recognition of the work you guys have and the teams have done together, isn't it? That we've managed to get to that state. So yeah, there is a bit of disquiet nationally about it, but you know, we're obviously in a much better position than perhaps many of our peers in that respect. So a recognition of that.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I can say as well, we have the regional chairs meetings, and that is a topic of discussion, has been a topic of discussion, and like I say, it feels like we're in a quite a good place on that, so that's one positive thing. So thank you. Are we happy to agree with the recommendation that's in there? Is everybody okay with that? With the amendment of what you've said, Chris? Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the next item. So we've got the item 10, statutory polling districts and places review. Laura's not here, so it's you, isn't it? It's yeah.
So yeah, it's the statutory review of the polling district and places. Now, this has been conducted within a statutory time frame. But what we have done is a little bit of a light touch approach with this one, because there is another review that's sort of going on in the background, which will the full review in 2025, when the Local Government Boundary Commission boundary changes come into effect for the ward areas, which obviously will have big impacts for Kirklees, because I think it's the first one in about 20 odd years that's happened.
Oh, 2004.
2004.
We had all our elections.
Right.
Of course we did. But, yeah.
Long before my time. Well, in this job anyway. We were required to do a public consultation, and we had a small number of representations received, and they can be found in Appendix 2 of your documents. A number of polling district boundaries were highlighted as problematic, and these are due to problems with historical anomalies and also new developments. So when these arise, we do revisit them periodically. What I will say is as well, we've got a statutory review at the moment, but if for example, ward councillors or the electorate do come with some proposals, we do look at them and review them annually anyway. especially after any elections. So there has been cases where after an election that we've identified polling stations, because unfortunately at the moment there are a number of community buildings that are closing and a lot of churches, so therefore we have to revisit particular district ward areas. The affected areas, electoral wards affected for this report is Kirkburton, Dalton, Golka, Dewsbury West, Batley East, Cleckheaton and Murfield. All ward members have been consulted on the changes as per the report, and no issues have been highlighted by any of them members. We also have done direct consultation with district councillors, with MPs, West Yorkshire Mayor and local charities and other support groups such as MENCAP. However, we didn't receive any comments back from them. All the polling stations identified and determined by the returning officer are compliant with all the disability access regulations. So, has anyone got any comments with regard to the areas in which have been put in Appendix 2, which was your representations, and Appendix 3, which is obviously in line with the returning officer? These are what have been deemed the appropriate actions.
Anything on those points? Councillor Pinnett?
I'm just going to reference the one in my ward, which is described as being appropriate because it's got free parking. I'm just looking at Paul to see what he's going to react to that. I mean, I do have a worry because if there is a foolish decision to impose parking charges on Cleckheaton, what it will do, people will park on that street going down to the church and people won't be able to get close to it. It happens now.
Yeah.
When there's events on and so on. So pay to vote, is it? Is that what we'd have to do? Well, that's what would have to happen, presumably.
I am aware obviously I'm aware of the location. I think there is some parking at the bottom, isn't there, by the church? Where all there's a residential.
Yeah, but where the sheltered accommodation is.
Yeah.
But that's theirs.
Yeah.
So that's set aside for carers coming and so on. You couldn't park there.
Is the parking by the church on the right-hand side, though?
There's a lay-by, but then it's always full, I can tell you, because I'm going down there, every week at least.
Yeah.
So I'm just pointing out that there will be a parking problem.
Right.
And I will leave it there, but...
Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, and I welcome this, and obviously my ward's referenced in here as well, and it's basically some tidying up, which is much welcome because people have never really understood why. We had little bits of my ward where they'd vote for Kirkburton in the local elections, but they might be in Huddersfield constituency or they might be in Colne Valley constituency. It was always a bit of an anomaly, wasn't it?
It was, yes.
So I'm quite happy to see that tidied up.
Yeah. No, that's good.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Socko?
Chair, just fine. Asking. I remember when the boundary was changed in 2004,
Right.
there was all-out election.
Yes.
Yeah, and it was all postal vote. That time there was no need for polling station. Is the government thinking against similar?
At this moment in time, we've had nothing to suggest that it'll be all-out postal votes like it was then. From what I've been told, I think that was a pilot. I think that was a pilot.
Think it did not work well that time, yeah.
So in 2026, it will be all-out elections. Possibly. Depending on...
There might be many changes.
Yeah, depending on the changes.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that was slightly outside of, it's not specific to the district. Did you have some more, more you want to
Yeah,
cover?
I think there's just obviously the Parliamentary constituency are due to change in November, early December. So it was important that we actually did this review sort of in front of that. So we're able then to get the register published in for the, late November, early December. I think the consequence of us obviously of that not happening is that we would then have to publish in February of next year, which therefore does have impacts on the planning for the May polls, as administratively we'd have to rebuild the register at a later stage. So, we're hopeful, obviously, the recommendations, determinations by the returning officer, will be passed today.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor, okay.
I was just going to comment on the parliamentary bit, because, personally I'm a bit grumpy about it because my ward gets split in two, which is just painful. But obviously part of mine will go off to Wakefield to be counted if there's a general, and there is possibility we may end up with a general election in May. So it's right that you get everything, all the things lined up now.
Yeah.
Just in case, because that would be. Oh, to be fair, Kath, we've been there before. I can remember last time I was part of Wakefield when I was knocking on doors in Farnley Tyres asking people to vote for an MP in Wakefield.
Yeah.
they couldn't understand it at all. So we've always been the bit that gets pushed around, shall we say, which is a bit unfortunate, but it is what it is. But yeah, I think it's great that we get it all done now, because there is that possibility of an earlier election, which if we didn't have all our ducks lined up would leave us in a bit of a mess, wouldn't it, Rob?
Yeah. Thanks very much. So are we okay then to agree with the recommendation? Everyone happy with that? Yeah. Agreed? Okay, Rob. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so the next item, item 11, is the Information Governance Annual Report. And Erin, you're here, I think, on Teams. Are you here?
Morning, Chair. Morning, everyone. Yes, I am. Thank you.
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Today I'm here to just talk you through the annual report for information governance for the 22-2023 year. And this just provides an update on the IG service for that year in our 4 key areas. We first looked at organisational and culture change. This focus in this area has been predominantly on comms and engagement with staff. We are in the process of rebranding and changing the perception of IG across the council. IG have previously been seen as a bit of a policing type area, when in fact we're supposed to supporting an enabling function, and we just want to reiterate that message to all staff as well. And we've been more active in pushing out communications through general comms channels and engaging with staff through training sessions, drop-ins, and being invited to other teams, meetings and things like that, to raise awareness of information governance and everything that comes with that. Primary focus of this report is going to be around statutory compliance. We've got a lot of areas to hit in there. So in terms of freedom of information and environmental information regulation, there were a slight reduction in the number of FOIs received by the council. There was a slight decrease as well in compliance for that year as well, which is unfortunate, but it can be attributed to a number of quite complex requests that we received in which were regarding quite a specific and complex planning application. There had been a drop in requests for review as well, which is quite encouraging and showing that we're getting the information out correctly in the first place. And compliance has increased in that area as well, with most just shy of 90% of our responses being issued within that 20 working day timeframe. In April this year, it was decided to reduce the amount of time that services do have to comply with freedom of information, environmental information requests from 18 days to 15 days. 20 days is the statutory time limit for the organisation to respond. And this was just to help with compliance in this area, as we were noting that most of the responses that were going late were only going a couple of days late due to complications at sign-off. So hopefully we'll see in the next annual report improvements in that area. But overall, there's no significant sort of concerns in the FOI and EIR at this time. In terms then of data subjects rights requests, subject access requests and disclosure requests for SARS, we've been managing a backlog of responses for some time now. We've been working with the Information Commissioner's Office since July 2022, monitoring our backlog and any progress that we're making in that area. If you've looked at slide 5, you'll note that the numbers don't particularly look fabulous, but as the numbers are increasing on there, but it is just a matter of we can't get them out faster than we receive them in terms of those complex requests. There has been an increase in the number of data subjects rights requests as well being received, around 25% increase on the 21-22 financial year, which is quite a significant rise considering the complexity of some of these cases. Excuse me. We're also aware already that we're seeing trends through Q1 and Q2 for this financial year that we are seeing increases again in the number of requests made. So we are examining processes and looking at how we can streamline this area of work to improve compliance and reduce the number of cases on our backlog. But it should be noted that despite the increases in requests in this area, our compliance levels in data subjects rights have improved, and we've maintained our compliance rates for SARS, which I feel is a bit of a success considering the increase in numbers. We also look at data protection impact assessments, or DPIAs. Over the last couple of years, we've noted that the number of DPIAs being submitted to us is starting to level out, and the numbers are relatively low in the 70s, considering the amount of personal data that we process as an authority. We are aware that the way that the system is currently set up for DPIAs is quite time consuming. And in terms of information security incidents, there's been a steady increase in the number of incidents being reported to us, but we don't necessarily see that as a bad thing. Like I said at the beginning, we've improved our communications and engagement with staff, and with that improved guidance and training in this area, we would expect to see an increase in the number of incidents being reported to us. Typically, the incidents reported are regarding information that's been sent to the wrong person, or the wrong document was attached to the email, for example, or in the post. The severity of these incidents can vary quite vastly in terms of the level of significance. So, for example, if we share an incorrect planning file with someone, would still need reporting to us, and we can manage that. However, if it was a child social care record, for example, that would be quite a significant incident we'd have to manage, and we would have to report to the Information Commissioner. So the same act can really depend on how significant those instances are and how they're dealt with. We did unfortunately have 6 incidents that we had to report to the Information Commissioner that year, but in all cases the ICO determined that they wouldn't be taking any further action, and we managed those instances appropriately. For slide 7, I just provided a quick overview around the compliance rate so far for this financial year. We can see, like I've mentioned, that there's an increase in the number of FOIs and SARs being made to the council, and we are expecting this trend to continue throughout the remainder of the year, and we'll just manage that as best we can. We've also been looking at our records of processing activities, or ROPA. The ROPA is ultimately an inventory of all of the information that we process as an authority, and it just basically presents all of our key information in one place. In January 23, it was noted that following an incident that some of the elements and ways of working that we operate that ROPA are no longer fit for purpose in their current format. So throughout this financial year, we are looking to develop that and ensure that as an authority we remain compliant with this legal requirement. So we're just looking at things like the data protection impact assessments and how we manage the information risk data flow mapping and link it all through our information asset register as well. We will be and are submitting regular reports to the Information Governance Board as well for key progress and updates in that area. Our central archive, we've seen an increase in number of boxes being submitted due to the closure of buildings and relocation of teams. There's ongoing work to sort through the files that we're receiving into the central archive, make sure that they're logged appropriately and we've got a clear understanding of contents of each box. Many of the files in the archive do have quite long retention dates, especially if they're in relation to children's social care records. That can be up to 75 to 100 years that we have to retain those. So there are more coming in than there are being destroyed at this time. But in November last year, the council did receive notification that the retention order of children's files for the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse had been lifted. So the information governance team are working through that as part of their BAU activities in terms of retention and management of the files in archive now. And then just to give an overview of kind of what we're looking at this year. So the aim is to improve for compliance in all areas and streamline processes. And then we're also looking at commencing some large-scale projects such as the records of processing activity work that will hopefully then improve the services that we offer and support that we can provide to other areas of the council. Do we have any questions?
Thanks, Erin. Any questions? Councillor Taylor, yeah.
Yeah, firstly, just want to thank you for the detailed report. It was quite clear and quite easy to read. I do worry about the upward trend in requests that's coming in, and just wonder if you'd reflect on how well you are resourced to deal with that. We are, and we've been talking earlier on in the meeting about going through some challenging times, can't speak properly, financially, which could lead to more people making FOI requests. I wouldn't at all be surprised to see that. When, you know, that something impacts on them, they might start asking questions about how that was, you know, that decision was made. So it's just a reflection on, are we resourced and can we deal with what we're having to deal with? And then I was also interested to see in your next steps about reviewing councillor support and offer. I'm not thinking you're going to be offering councillors more support, but I think it probably is worthwhile doing that little bit about how, when did we last make sure that some of us a bit longer in the tooth councillors had something on information governance and how we manage it, because obviously we're all our own data protection officers. So I think that, you know, I was quite pleased to see that actually, and I'm guessing, and as I say, I'm a bit long in the tooth now, so I can't remember, but I'm guessing that this is covered in our induction training for new councillors as well, so probably some of that could be picked up and maybe used. But yeah, but thank you.
No, thank you. In terms of we say around councillor support, we do come to inductions every time they come round and meet with all new councillors. Like I say, some of those longer serving members, we are more than happy to come to any group meetings or what have you and provide any additional training. We're here for advice and support for you all as well, and we're happy to help where we can. And there is, I believe, a councillor e-learning module on online as well, and we can ensure that that link is circulated and made available so everyone's aware that it's there, so that councillors can go in and refresh their training as they deem appropriate. In terms of the increase in trends in numbers, it's not just us, all authorities we can see in communication with our neighbouring authorities, they're all seeing the same issues, and we're aware it's going on cross country as well. We are taking steps at the moment to work with certain services where we're seeing specific interest, shall we say, to try and make as much information that we can make available in the first instance online or through various other means, to try and preempt some of the requests that we may receive. So, for example, we're getting up to the Christmas period now. We tend to receive a lot of requests around how much we've spent on Christmas lights and celebrities to do light switch-ons and various other things. So if we can preempt that, we try and make that information available moving forward to reduce some of those requests coming through.
Erin, thanks. It's a great report. It makes a really complex subject accessible. Few too many acronyms for my personal liking, but I got there eventually. I suppose thinking about the role of the Audit Committee and looking for assurance, I take lots of assurance from the fact you're able to share all this data and it's clear you've got a plan for going forward. I'm just a bit twitchy about the declining performance and at what point the declining performance in terms of processing SARS and FOIs means it becomes an issue for the council, either reputationally or in performance. So I'm not sure I'm asking you a question, perhaps I'm asking other colleagues a question. At what point should the committee start to worry if that, obviously we can see the growing demand, it's possible, isn't it, that our compliance will be less good this year than it was last year. So when do we start to worry about that as a committee, I suppose? If at all.
Do you want to, Julie, want to come in on?
Yeah, let me come in on that and see if I can try and respond to you. It's an interesting balance actually. So we are in we're in communication with the ICO about the levels of SARS, and the SARS are problematic across the UK. We're not the only ones who are in that position. I think we're probably doing as well as, or if not better than, a number of our colleagues across West Yorkshire and more widely. So I think we're in constant contact with them so that we don't go further up the naughty step in terms of backlog. We do review. We are concerned about the increase in the number of FOIs. You know, obviously you'll see that it's up by the second quarter by 150. I think Erin might be able to comment in more detail about what those are and whether there's a trend linked to the issues that Councillor Taylor mentioned. I'm not sure there necessarily is. It will depend. And I think that, as Erin's already said, we're putting steps in place to look at ways in which we can make things more fluid, and so we make less work for ourselves and for the service areas that are the focus of those FOIs. This regularly goes to ELT, which is the executive team, to look at the risk and the assurance around those things. And it is a fine balance. If we thought we were going to drop down significantly, we would have to look at putting more steps in place to support those things, and we regularly keep that under review. I hope that answers the questions, but it is a fine balance, because particularly in the financial situation we're in at the moment. And I think this does come up, and it's certainly something that government look at in terms of whether we've got the right support and steps in place in this area, because it can be an indication that things aren't going so well. But actually I think that this is a positive position. I think this sets out what we're doing. We recognise some of the things that we need to do to make things better or keep things on track.
Can I just check, you know, in terms of like your SARS and stuff, it's not a straightforward thing of you need one more member of staff. It's the issues is where the data is, retrieving the data, complex cases needing legal advice or redaction. Is it that sort of stuff that's causing the delays, not just a kind of staffing thing necessarily?
Thanks for that question. It is, and I'm sure that Erin would come in as well, but a lot of the SARS relate to children's cases, and they can be thousands and thousands and thousands of pages long. So it takes a long time and a lot of skill to be able to redact those appropriately. This was the reason why we've ended up having a conversation with the ICO about how we manage these. So we've found different ways of doing that. So instead of waiting, instead of doing all of the files on a particular individual, we actually do it in batches now, and we have an ongoing conversation with the individual who has requested the information. We have social workers who are involved in doing that.